Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Day and welcome to the second part in this video series on cloud storage, how to protect your data. In the first part, I just introduced cloud storage. What is it and why is it of benefit to you? In this presentation, I'm going to be going a bit deeper into how to protect your data. I'll then look at business shared drives as a really cost-effective and powerful way to actually protect your data to the next level. And then I'll go into different options you've got, so iCloud, Microsoft, Google, Dropbox and others. And then finally, in the last part, I'll be talking about what I recommend based on what you're currently using, or if you're new to it, what I recommend based on what we use in our business. In this presentation, we're talking about how to protect your data. We'll touch on file ownership and what that actually means. We'll talk about personal accounts versus free company accounts and how you can use free company accounts to give you an extra level of protection. I'll talk about business accounts and how that can, again, improve the protection that you're giving to your work that's being produced by your employees or your contractors. I'll talk about transfer of ownership as a means to, again, further protect yourself if you're using free accounts. I'll talk about a quick free Google hack, which can just help if you're just getting started, you're on a low budget, but you want to do the best you can for the money you've got. And then I'll touch on business shared drives, but I'm going to go deeper into shared drives in the next presentation. So first of all, file ownership. In this example, I'm not talking about the intellectual property ownership from a legal perspective. I'm talking about who has the ownership in terms of which account owns that document. So which accounts can delete it, which accounts can access it, which accounts have the ability to empty it from the recycling bin. It's really important to understand that if an employee works for you but they use their own personal account, that they are the owner of that document and they have full control over it. So they can, in effect, delete all of their work from you without you having any ability to get that back. Unfortunately, this is probably the most common setup, that when you start working with your first employee or your first virtual assistant, for example, that you'll just rely on them providing you with their own email address. So maybe that's jane@gmail.com or jane@outlook.com or whatever email service they're using. And then you'll say to them, oh, can you just do this work for me? They'll use their own Google Drive account or their OneDrive account. They'll create the document or the spreadsheet, and then they'll send you a link to that. And you think, great, they've done that work for me. The problem is that if that information, that data, those files are stored on their account, when they leave your company, those files will disappear. You'll no longer have access to them because they're now still saved on their own personal account. If, like what happened to me, that person then empties their drive because they want to free up some space, that work is gone forever. There's no way for you to recover it because you were never the owner of it. One way to get around this, to protect yourself to a certain degree, is to use company email accounts. So these are free email accounts or paid email accounts if you're on a business package that you then have access to after the person leaves. So you could set this up for your employee, or they could do it and then share the password with you. But the key thing here is you need to know the password and have your email as the recovery email, so that when the person does leave the company, you can still log in, access and get any of the files that are still in there. In a minute, I'm going to talk about how to actually improve on this, but this is a really simple fix which you can do straight away. So just set up some email addresses. So your VA@gmail.com. So you might have my VA1, my company @gmail.com. Whatever your company is called, you just want to create some free email addresses. Then your employee will save work into those drives when they're working with you. You can use an app like LastPass, so you don't have to actually share the password openly across the internet, because that's a risky thing to do. So you can use something like LastPass to actually give access to your employee so that they can then log in using LastPass into their Gmail or their Outlook account and then create work and save it in that right place. The great thing about LastPass is that if they leave, you simply switch off access. When the new person starts, give them access to the same account and they can use exactly the same drive. They have access to everything that the previous person did, and therefore it's really simple and quick. Just a quick note about LastPass, it's not a secure way to share passwords. the passwords are always visible. So I'd still recommend always changing a password when an employee leaves a company, because there is a chance they've created a copy of that password somewhere and they could log in and do some damage to you if they wanted to. So always change the password anyway. LastPass just makes it a little bit more convenient rather than having to openly share passwords across the internet, which is not a secure thing to do. However, it is still possible that that person could delete those files, empty their recycling bin while they still had access to the account, and therefore you'd lose the data. This could be done maliciously. It could also be done by accident. If their account, which they can log into and access, if it's a free account, ultimately they own it, and therefore they could do you damage if they wanted to. So a quick way to fix this is to get your employee to transfer ownership of any documents they create while they're working for you over to you. This means that you now own them, that they can't delete them. If they delete them on their side, it doesn't matter. They lose access, but you still own them, so therefore you retain access. This means that if they left the company, if they maliciously try to destroy your data, they can't. It doesn't matter, because it's on your drive, you own it. And then if a new employee starts, you simply share it with them and they can carry on working where the other person left off. The limitations are that you can only transfer Google Docs, so that's Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides. And also only if you're both in a Gmail account, a free Gmail account. So you're both in the same domain. So you both have @gmail.com email addresses. However, if you're using G Suite, so you have a Gmail account, but it's in your domain, so therefore it's steve@mycompany.com, but it's hosted with G Suite, then you can transfer from one account to another user. You do have to be in the same domain, so you'd have to buy a license for everybody in your company. That's every contractor, every employee. They would all have to have a G Suite account, so it can get quite expensive. But you can transfer any file type. As long as they're in your domain, so they're both at yourcompany.com, then you can transfer videos and images and PDFs, everything. In a minute, I'm going to talk about shared drives, and that's a really powerful and affordable fix to that problem of having to have licenses for everybody. So if you're using Dropbox, then actually you can transfer ownership in Dropbox. And at the time of writing this, you can do this in the free version of Dropbox as well. So that is an option. And actually you can combine Dropbox with Microsoft or Google, but then store things in there. However, you're then having to learn and manage and deal with a whole nother app. And I just like to keep things simple in my life. I don't want to have to deal with another set of rules and procedures of working with an app completely when I don't need to. You can get around this by either using Google or using Microsoft, as long as you're a bit clever about doing it and you pick the right apps. And I'm going to talk you through that over the next few slides and in the next presentation. If you're using OneDrive, the free version, unfortunately you can't transfer ownership, so I don't think OneDrive free is a good option for business use. And similarly, most of the other types of services like iCloud and other types of storage, you can't transfer ownership. So whatever cloud storage you're using, I would recommend checking, can you transfer ownership of files and folders over from one user to another or from one person to another. If you can't, then I would definitely recommend you consider switching to a provider that does, using the recommendations I'm going to give you. So just to illustrate this, to make it really clear what I mean by on the same domain. So if Jane has a gmail.com address, she can transfer files ownership to another gmail.com address and only to another gmail.com address, and also only Google Docs. So Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Sheets. You can't transfer PDFs, images, or movies, for example, films, for example, across from one Gmail account to another free Gmail account. If, however, you're using G Suite, then you can transfer ownership of all types of documents, but you both need to have a licensed G Suite account. So you both need to be in the same domain. So yourcompany.com, for example. If they're using their own G Suite account in their own company and you're using your G Suite account in your company, you can't transfer ownership. It's got to be in the same domain. So therefore you have to pay for licenses for everybody. So just to illustrate that, you can't transfer from a gmail.com account into your own company domain name, and you can't transfer from someone else's company domain name into your company domain name. You can't transfer also from a company domain name into a Gmail account, so you're pretty stuck. However, There is a quick hack you can do if you do have a G Suite account and your employee is using gmail.com. So here you're going to set up a separate Gmail account. Maybe you already have a Gmail account, or you can set up a new one for free and call it myfiles@gmail.com. It doesn't matter. But the point is, this person can now transfer ownership of Google Docs, slides and sheets to that Gmail account. They can still share access to the company account, so you can still edit the documents from your company domain, but you just don't own it. That's why you need that second account. So if you're just working in a Google Docs, slides and sheets, then this is a really easy and quick thing to set up, and it's free to do. So you only end up having that one license for your own email address in G Suite, and everybody else can then have Gmail accounts. The alternative to this is to use business shared drives, and this works if you're using Microsoft or Google or Dropbox. For example, if you use a shared drive, it used to be called Team drives in Google, and you store information in that shared drive, it's the company that owns that from the outset. You have total control over that information. You can stop people from printing, from deleting, from editing things. You have control over exactly what that person can or can't do with that information, and it's all automatic. Similarly, if you're using Microsoft, if you upgrade to SharePoint, you get exactly the same control. Or if you're using Dropbox for Business, you also have that total control. I'm going to cover this in more detail in the next presentation. So in this presentation, we've talked about file ownership and the importance of owning the files so people can't delete them. We talked about using personal accounts and the risks of doing that, and instead using free company accounts if you want to keep the cost down and you're only really working in Google Docs. This only works for Google, unfortunately. It doesn't work for the free Outlook or Microsoft versions. And then we talked about using G Suite business accounts so you can transfer ownership, but the problem with that is the cost of having to have a license for everybody in your company. We talked about transferring ownership using a free Google hack. If again, you're just using Google Docs in your company, you're not really using images and graphics and the rest of it, then that can be a really quick way to get started. And then when you need to upgrade, you can. And I touched on business shared drives. And in the next presentation, I'm going to show you why business shared drives is the most affordable and the most robust and secure way to store your data and retain total control over everything that's done. And it's a lot cheaper than most people think.